Welcome back to Horror Recaps. My name is Freddie, and in a moment, you're going to listen to a frightening tale narrated by me. Beware, fear awaits you. In this creepy horror tale, we see a young woman named Harper Marlowe dazed momentarily, but she quickly snaps back and closes the door. Suddenly, her husband, James, is seen falling to his death right in front of her, as she frightfully peeks out the window, and for a brief second, they appear to be staring directly at each other. Now, in the aftermath of this tragedy, Harper decides to retreat alone to the quaint English countryside for a vacation. Upon arriving at this country house that she's renting, Harper is greeted by its eccentric but well-meaning owner, Jeffrey. He gives her a tour of the place, and during this, Jeffrey assumes she's going to stay with her husband due to her salutation as Mrs., and asks about Mr. Marlowe. However, Harper merely implies that she is divorced but hasn't changed her surname yet. Later, Harper video calls her friend Riley and notes how she may have splurged too much on this 2-week-long vacation. Right while they're talking, the camera starts to cut out with a flash of static, showing what appears to be Riley screaming in horror on the screen. But Harper doesn't really give it much consideration, and it quickly reverts back to normal. Afterwards, a flashback shows Harper's failing marriage as she tries to get a divorce from James. However, he tries to rope her into a guilt trip and threatens to kill himself if she follows through with the divorce, leaving her with the guilt on her conscience for the rest of her life. After a while, she comes back to reality, and while she is clearly distressed, Harper goes for a walk to clear out her head. She soon finds herself surrounded by greenery and wanders deeper into it, seemingly relishing the beauty that is around her. Following this, Harper comes across a long, dark tunnel and shouts from the edge, her voice echoing all the way down the tunnel till it fades away. She then slowly enters the tunnel in amusement and shouts out again, and this time the echo doesn't stop, so she adds layer upon layer, creating a haunting yet harmonious symphony. Unfortunately, this moment of awe is cut short when a man's figure appears at the other end of the opening. He begins sprinting directly at Harper while making a strange shrieking sound, so she hastily flees the place. A short while later, Harper discovers an odd building, but unfortunately there doesn't seem to be any way to get inside. As a result, she makes her way up a hill in the mud, where she finds several other deserted buildings close to an old railroad. Shortly after, she reaches across the woods, revealing a vast open field. Harper tries to enjoy the scenery again by taking a photo of the old buildings, but she spots an unfamiliar guest in her shot, a completely naked man just standing and eerily watching her. In another flashback, Harper sees James's body for the first time following the argument and the fall from the building. It is revealed that James died miserably. Not only did he die from the fall, but he also impaled his arm on a spear top fence and broke his ankle. Following the naked man's encounter, Harper tries to relax on the bath. However, she can't help but return to the photo, this time zooming in on the man, possibly out of concern and confusion. Afterwards, Harper is spotted on the phone with a coworker and fails to catch the same naked man walking up behind her outside. He then creepily comes to the back door while she has her back to him. It's only later, when she's giving Riley a tour of the house, that she notices the intruder. Immediately, Harper contacts the police to deal with the nuisance, but just as she enters the main hall, she notices that the front door is slightly open. So Harper grabs the key and hurries to lock the door, but the intruder suddenly reaches in through the mail slot, causing her to drop the phone in a panic. Another flashback shows James losing his temper and smashing a lamp. Furious with his behavior, Harper texts Riley expressing her fear of him, but James grabs her phone away and reads the messages she sent. Clearly dissatisfied with what he has just seen, James accuses Harper of constantly making herself the victim. He then demands that she unlock her phone, but when Harper refuses, James reacts angrily by punching her in the face. Later, the intruder gets arrested, and it is discovered that the arresting officer shares the same appearance as Jeffrey and the naked man. Although the lady officer is sympathetic to Harper's situation, they weren't able to uncover anything about the man, and she believes he's harmless based on what she's learned. Following this, Harper explores the area around the village, beginning with an old, deserted, but exceptionally elegant church. She reaches her breaking point and screams for James to leave in yet another memory. He tries to apologize, but Harper doesn't hear him and instead shoves him forcibly out the door. He apologizes repeatedly, but she slams the door in his face as Harper wails in remembrance of the moment. A priest walks in, but he swiftly leaves without a word as he notices Harper growing more emotional. A while later, Harper wipes her tears away and walks outside the church, where she finds a child wearing a face mask staring at her. He takes off the mask, revealing the same face as Jeffrey and the cop. While the two are talking, the priest, who has an identical face to every other male before him, enters and orders the young boy to move along. He then asks Harper if she's in pain and admits to having seen her back in the church. Then the priest invites Harper to sit for a chat, and she opens up more about her and James's marriage. She explains that they were already in the process of separating, but then he laid hands on her, something that had never happened before. This made Harper so angry that she threw him out and locked the door, but James burst into the flat upstairs, and in an attempt to climb his way back down to her apartment, James fell to his death. Harper tears up, claiming that James followed through on his plan to kill himself, leaving her to bear the burden. Moreover, Harper states that James locked eyes with her while falling, and that this moment has haunted her, making her feel guilty for his death, even though it is not truly her fault. The priest then lends his fairly shallow perspective, believing that she only wants to be understood, before putting his hand on her leg. Although it seems that the priest is on her side at first, the layers of his true character quickly peel back as he blames Harper, much as James did before. He claims that if she had given James a fair chance to apologize after being punched, he would still be alive. Harper gets understandably offended by this and storms out, but shortly after, the priest rubs his palm longingly over the spot where she sat. Down at a local bar that evening, Harper walks in to see that the bartender and every other patron in the bar have the same face as Jeffrey. Just then, the officer who detained the naked man walks in and asks if she's holding up after the incident earlier. He then admits that they were forced to release the man, as there was very little evidence to charge him with. Harper is then taken aback and claims the creepy man was stalking her and even tried to break into the house. Unfortunately, the officer dismisses her claim and advises Harper to alert the authorities if she sees the intruder again. Following this, Harper heads home through the dark streets, but she is abruptly stopped by a distant scream. She then quickens her pace, and the naked man appears from behind a tree, watching with fascination as she rushes home. When Harper arrives at the house, she locks the door and frantically calls Riley, telling her everything that took place that day. Riley also addresses her support by offering to pay her a visit at the country house, so Harper goes to get the address. Strangely, as soon as she gives her the details, the line begins to glitch again, and Riley misses what she said. When she tries again, the call drops, so she texts the address, which fortunately seems to go through. Strangely, Harper receives an agitated reply that does not sound like her friend, and the lights outside begin to flash erratically. As she approaches the window with caution, Harper observes the cop standing outside by the tree, remaining silent despite her questioning. Just then, all of the lights go out, and when they come back on, the cop has vanished. In a matter of a few seconds, all of the apples from the garden tree fall to the ground, and with the sound of racing footsteps approaching, one of the bar patrons shrieks as he runs towards her. Harper, on the other hand, outruns him and gets back inside as she crawls into the kitchen to fetch a knife. The lights go out once more, and she notices a shadow passing by. As she peers through the door, the lights go out yet again, and there's a loud thud at the front door, followed by one of the windows bursting in, and a kitchen chair falling out near her. Just then, Harper hears footsteps crunching on the glass, but it's Jeffrey who opens the door, puzzled. She frantically claims that someone was attempting to break in, but he uncovers a wounded crow in the kitchen, which appears to be the cause of the broken window. Harper, on the other hand, is certain that the two men were here to break into the property, and Jeffrey appears to be understanding and compassionate of her plight. As the landlord, he tells Harper that he would look around and settle things up, but when she begs him not to go outside, Jeffrey dismisses her concerns as nonsense. Then, just as he steps outside, the lights go out again. But Jeffrey waves his arms to turn them back on. However, when the lights flicker this time, he, like the others, vanishes. Following this, the naked man emerges in place of Jeffrey. Having several needles jammed into his body, he begins to stagger towards Harper, who had stepped outside with a knife to check on Jeffrey. As they come closer, he takes a deep breath and throws a handful of dandelion seeds at her. Harper leans back, holds her arms out, and sucks one of the dandelion seeds into her open mouth. Suddenly, we're bombarded with several flashes of Harper screaming under the water, and then back at the window as the seeds start flying around. Likewise, the carvings from the church are also emphasized. She is in a room bathed in red light with the same carving in it before racing through the woods. Coming back to reality, Harper dreamily walks back inside and slowly closes the door. The naked man then softly extends his arm through the mail slot towards her, and she takes his hand in hers. However, he tugs at her hand, causing Harper to scream in terror and tear his arm all the way through with the knife. Then, as he pulls his hand back through the mail slot, the tiny space pushes the blade into his skin and nearly splits his entire arm in half. Following this, the creepy young boy is seen in another room with one of his arms nearly severed. He then shows Harper his dangling arm and moans that she has hurt him, and despite her warnings to stay away, the young boy continues to approach her. A few moments later, one of the bar guests kicks open the front door and follows her into another room, and as Harper stands breathlessly, peering at the doorknob jiggles, and it's the priest who enters and recites a poem before washing his severed hand. Now, the priest promptly shifts into a more sexual arena, questioning Harper about her virginity and referring to her as a master of carnality based on his own deluded fantasies. He then tries to have his way with her on the sink, but Harper stabs him in the gut with the knife still in her hand. She then dashes outside past the apple tree and drives furiously through the dark streets. Unfortunately, she plows into Jeffrey in the middle of the road at random. He slowly gets to his feet and walks to the car, dragging her out by the hair while growling, "Mrs. Marlowe." He then gets into his car and speeds away, only to quickly return and barrel towards Harper at full speed. With this, Jeffrey screams hysterically as he chases Harper down the road back to the home. After a while, Harper falls to her knees and sobs as a shadow looms towards her. The naked man emerges from the shadows once again, this time covered in leafy growths as well as twigs protruding from his head. Suddenly, he limps as though his leg is broken, his injuries resembling those of James after his hand was impaled on the spike. He silently screams in anguish due to his enormous pregnant belly, and a new life emerges from his womb as he gives birth to the young boy. Then, the kid, in a creepy fashion, gives birth to the priest, who then gives birth to Jeffrey. As the cycle of nature, all of them bear the split hand and broken leg and instinctively crawl towards Harper, while silently screaming in misery. After witnessing this bizarre birth cycle, Harper grabs an axe and patiently waits for the next born to emerge before killing it for good. Finally, the last one that Jeffrey gives birth to shares an uncanny resemblance to James, as well as the split arm and broken leg. He then takes a seat on the couch and explains how he died before blaming Harper once more. When she asks what he wants, the man simply says he wants her love, which Harper can no longer provide. The next day, Riley arrives at the estate to discover Harper's wrecked car and a bloody trail leading inside. She then spots Harper, who simply looks up at her and smiles. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thank you for watching.